Naqshbandi. The Naqshbandi Persian, Nqshbndi or Naqshbandiyah Arabic, Nqshbndi romanized, Naqshbandiyah is a major Sunni order of Sufism. Its name is derived from Baha-ud-Din Naqshband Bukhari. Naqshbandi masters trace their lineage to the Islamic prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr, the first Caliph of Sunni Islam. Spiritual lineage criteria. In Sufism, as in any serious Islamic discipline such as jurisprudence, fiqh, Quranic recital, tajwid, and hadith, according to Carl W. Ernst, within the Sufi tradition, the formation of the orders did not immediately produce lineages of master and disciple. There are few examples before the 11th century of complete lineages going back to the Prophet Muhammad. Yet, the symbolic importance of these lineages was immense. They provided a channel to divine authority through master-disciple chains. It was through such chains of masters and disciples that spiritual power and blessings were transmitted to both general and special devotees. This means that a Sufi master has met and taken the way from a master, and that during his lifetime he has explicitly and verifiably invested the disciple, whether in writing or in front of a number of witnesses, as a fully authorized. Such spiritual transmission from an unbroken line of masters is one criterion that distinguishes a true or connected Sufi path Tariq Mutasila from an inauthentic or dissevered path Tariq Munqatiya. The leader of a dissevered path may claim to be a Sufi master on the basis of an authorization given by a master in private or other unverifiable circumstance, or by a figure already passed from this world, such as one of the righteous person or Mohammed, or in a dream, or so on. These practices only warm the heart Ustanasubiha, but none meets Sufism's condition that a Sufi master must have a clear authorization connecting him with Mohammed. Spreading of the order. The Naqshbandi order owes many insights to Yusuf Hamdani and Abdul Khalik Gajadwani in the 12th century, the latter of whom is regarded as the organizer of the practices and is responsible for placing stress upon the purely silent invocation. It was later associated with Baha-ud-Din Naqshband Bukhari in the 14th century, hence the name of the order. The name can be interpreted as engraver of the heart, pattern maker, reformer of patterns, image maker, or related to the image maker. The way is sometimes referred to as the sublime Sufi path and the way of the golden chain. The path's name has changed over the years. Referring to Abu Bakr as Siddiq, it was originally called as Siddiqiyah between the time of Bayezid al-Bistami and Abdul Khalik al-Gujdawani at Tayfuriyah. From the time of Abdul Khalik al-Gujdawani to Shah Naqshband, the Kh Wajagan or Haja, from the time of Shah Naqshband, and on a Naqshbandiyah. Afterwards, a branch or sub-order name was added. From Ubadullah Ara to Imam Rabbani, the way was called Naqshbandiyah Arariyah, from Imam Rabbani to Shamsuddin Mazhar Naqshbandiyah Mujadadiyah. From Shamsuddin Mazhar to Maulana Khalid al-Baghdadi Naqshbandiyah Mazhariyah, from Maulana Khalid onwards Naqshbandiyah Khalidiyah, Naqshbandiyah Mustafi Khalidi, and so on. The way or school connected to the late Sheikh Sultan al-Awliya Maulana Sheikh Nazim, who lived in northern Cyprus, is undoubtedly the most active of all Naqshbandi orders, with followers in almost every corner of the world. It is referred to as the Naqshbandi Haqqani way. According to some estimates, there are over 60 million disciples and centers in almost every country of the world. It also had the largest internet presence. There are disciples in almost all of Europe, including the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, and in the United States of America, the Middle East, Africa. It is most active in Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, as well as being the most prevalent Sufi order in the West. The Prince of Malaysia, Raja Ashman Shah, was a disciple of this order. South Asia. The Naqshbandiyah order became an influential factor in Indo-Muslim life, and for 2 centuries it was the principal spiritual order in the Indian subcontinent. Paki Bila Biring No. 24 in the Naqshbandi Haqqani Golden Chain is credited for bringing the order to India during the end of the 16th century. He was born in Kabul and brought up and educated in Kabul and Samarkand, where he came in contact with the Naqshbandiyah order through Tawajjuh. When he came to India, he tried to spread his knowledge about the order, but died 3 years later. Among his disciples were Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi No. 25 in the Naqshbandi Haqqani Golden Chain and Sheikh Abdul Haq of Delhi. After his death, his student, Sheikh Ahmed primarily took over. Sheikh Ahmed was born in 1561, and his father Makdum Abdul Ahad was from a high Sufi order. He completed his religious and secular studies at the age of 17. Later, he became known as Mujaddid al-Thani. It was through him that the order gained popularity within a short period of time. Sheikh Ahmed broke away from earlier mystic traditions and propounded his theory of the unity of the phenomenal world. In particular, he spoke out against innovations introduced by Sufis. For instance, he opposed Emperor Akbar's views on Hindu and Muslim marriages. He stated Muslims should follow their religion, and non-Muslims their ways, as the Quran enjoins, "For you yours, and for me my religion." Also, he did not believe in keeping the state and ruler separate, and worked hard to change the outlook of the ruling class. After his death, his work was continued by his sons and descendants. In the 18th century, Shah Wali Allah played an important role in the religious sciences, particularly the Hadith, and translated the Quran into Persian. He also looked at a fresh interpretation of Islamic teachings in the light of the new issues. Furthermore, he played a significant role in the political developments of the period. During the 19th century too, Naqshbandiyah saints made significant contributions to the chain silsila by restating some of its basic ideological postures. Currently, the South Asian region's most widespread branch of the Naqshbandi tariqah, Maulana Shams Rahman al-Abbasi, a well-known scholar, has been actively illuminating the lives of thousands. His senior-most deputy sheikh, Humayun Hanif Naqshbandi Mujaddidi, Sheikh Huti Tariqa wa Sharia Maulana Mohammad Komaruzi Zaman al-Habadi, Sheikh Mohammad Mohsin Munawar Yalsafi Naqshbandi Mujaddidi, and Pir Zulfikar Ahmad Naqshbandi are the leading sheikhs in spreading the silsila in the region, and has more than 250 deputies to aid in that effort. There is also a darbar of Naqshbandi order in the district of Mayanwali, respectively called as Bor Sharif, also known as Fatih Siddiqui Bor Sharif. Its Sheikh Fakir Fate Mohammad Borvi was a Sufi saint and lover of Allah. In Pakistan, Noor Mohammad Qurahi and his son Fakir Mohammad Qurahi from Qura Sharif near Kohat led the chain in 20th century. They have more than 70 deputies, including Pir Ghulam Nabi Hashmi, Pir Jamat Ali Shah and Pir Jamat Ali Lasani, Pir Karmanwala, Pir Sharik Puri, and Idgah Sharif and Hazur Mehbub-e Rasuli from Dargo, Nurpur Sharif Gambat, and many more. Syria and Palestine. The Naqshbandiyah was introduced into Syria at the end of the 17th century by Murad Ali al-Bukhari, who was initiated in India. Later, he established himself in Damascus, but traveled throughout Arabia. His branch became known as the Muridiyah. After his death in 1720, his descendants formed the Muradi family of scholars and sheikhs who continued to head the Muridiyah. In 1820 and onward, Khalid Shahrazuri rose as the prominent Naqshbandi leader in the Ottoman world. After the death of Khalid in 1827, his order became known as the Khalidiyah, which continued to spread for at least 2 decades. In Syria and Lebanon, the leaders of every active Naqshbandiyah group acknowledged its spiritual lineage, which had retained the original Naqshbandiyah way. Later, a strife between Khalid's caliphs led to disruption of the order, causing it to divide. When political leader Musa Bakr died in 1973, the pre-Mujaddidi line of the Naqshbandiyah in Greater Syria came to an end. One of the only branches to have survived till recently is the one based in the Conque al-Uzbekiyah in Jerusalem. The number of its members had increased at the end of the 19th century. The Farmadiyah branch, which practices silent and vocal invocation, is still present in Lebanon and is named after Ali Farmadi. We shall speak about the great-grand Sheikh Abdullah Fazi ad-Dagestani d. 1973, and quote a small passage from his biography written by Sheikh Hisham Kabani. Sheikh Abdullah moved to Homs, where he visited the mosque and tomb of the companion of the Prophet, Khalid ibn al-Walid. He stayed briefly in Homs. He moved to Damascus, in the Midden district, near the tomb of Sa'd ad-Din Jabawi, a saint from the family of the Prophet. There he established the first Zawiyah for the branch of the Naqshbandi order, which had gone to Dagestan. With him the golden chain of the Naqshbandi order, which had gone from Damascus to India, Baghdad, and Dagestan, now returned to Damascus. His two daughters were married. Rabiha had 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. Madiha was married to Sheikh Tawfiq al-Hibri, one of the great Islamic scholars of Lebanon. Soon people began to crowd into his Zawiyah. They arrived there from all over the city, Sufis, government people, businessmen, and common people. Myriads were coming every day to sit at the door of his khanqa. Daily they served food to hundreds, many of whom also slept there. Then he received a spiritual order to move to the mountain of Qasim. It is the highest point in Damascus, from whose vantage the entire city can be viewed. With the help of his 2 senior murids, Sheikh Mohammed Nazim Adil and Sheikh Hussein Ali, he built a house. This house and the mosque next to it still stand, and the mosque is the site of his Makam shrine. He saw in a vision, while he was building the mosque, that the Prophet, with Shah Naqshband and Sayyidina Ahmed al-Faruqi, came and put posts to mark the shape and location of the walls of the mosque. As soon as the vision ended, the markers were visible, and everyone present saw them. At that mosque, over the years, hundreds of thousands of visitors were received, for healing, for prayers, for training, for all kinds of external and internal knowledge. It was in Damascus, Syria, that Grand Sheikh Abdullah Fazi Dagestani preached from and also died. His blessed tomb is to be found in Damascus. It is estimated that a massive crowd of about 400,000 people attended his funeral. See Sheikh Hisham Kabani's book on the 40 Grand Sheikhs of the Naqshbandi Sufi path. Lately the Naqshbandi Haqqani Sufi order was led by his successor Nazim al-Haqqani and might still be very active in Syria. Dagestan, Rashashan, 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 Rashashan. Egypt. During the middle of the 19th century, Egypt was inhabited and controlled by Naqshbandis. A major Naqshbandi khanqa was constructed in 1851 by Abazai, who did this as a favor to Naqshbandi Sheikh Ahmad Ashik. Ahmad Ashik headed the order till his death in 1883. Ahmad Ashik was a practicer of the Diyya branch of the Khalidiyah. In 1876, Sheikh Judah Ibrahim amended the original Diyya, which became known as al-Judiyya, and gained a following in al-Sharqiya province in the eastern Nile Delta. During the last 2 decades of the 19th century, 2 other versions of Naqshbandiyah spread in Egypt. One of these was introduced by a Sudanese, al-Sharif Ismail al-Sinari. Al-Sinari had been initiated into the Khalidiyah and Mujaddidiyah by various sheikhs during his time in Mecca and Medina. Initially, he tried to obtain a following in Cairo, but was not able to, therefore he resorted going to Sudan. It is from there that the order spread into Upper Egypt from 1870 onward under Musa Mawad, who was al-Sinari's successor. Muhammad al-Laythi, son of al-Sinari, was the successor after Mawad's death. The Judiyya and the Khalidiyya branches spread in the last decades of the 19th century and continued to grow and are still active today. Mohammed Amin al-Kurdi led a branch until his death in the early 1900s. After his death, the branch was headed by his son Najm ad-Din al-Kurdi until his death in 1988. Then his son, Ph.D. Abdulrahman al-Kurdi, the deputy dean of Al-Azhar University, led the branch for 2 years, but he died of cancer after. Now that branch is headed by Counselor/Judge Mohammed Saif el-Kurdi. The el-Kurdi family are also part of the Islamic prophet Muhammad's bloodline. Unfortunately, none of the early orders survived far into the 20th century. The longest living group of Kanka-based Naqshbandis lived in the Kanka of Sheikh Ahmad Ashik, which closed in 1954. This is when all the Kankas in Egypt were closed, and the Awqaf supporting these establishments were taken over by the Ministry of Awqaf. The buildings were either assigned a different function or demolished as part of urban renovation programs. China. Ma Lechai brought the Naqshbandi into Shbnd. Ma Mingsan also brought the Naqshbandi order, creating the Jariya Jhry Achiyi Lin Yi Menhuan. These two Menhuan were rivals and fought against each other, which led to the Jariya Rebellion, Dungan Revolt, and Dungan Revolt 1895. Some Chinese Muslim generals of the Ma clique belonged to Naqshbandi Sufi Menhuan, including Ma Zhenao and Ma Anliang of the Kufiya Naqshbandi Menhuan. Ma Sheiwu and Ma Yuanzhang were other prominent leaders from the Jariya Naqshbandi Menhuan. Many disciples of the Naqshbandi Haqqani Sufi order remain in China today. Prominent sheikhs. Baha-ud-Din Naqshband Bukhari. Baha-ud-Din Naqshband Bukhari 1318–1389 was the founder of the Sufi Naqshbandi order. He was born in the village of Kasr-i-Arifin near Bukhara. Ahmad Sirhindi. Sheikh Ahmad al-Faruqi al-Sirhindi 1564–1624 was considered a mujaddid and a leading Naqshbandi sheikh from India. He was from an Ashraf family claiming descent from Caliph Umar. He received most of his early education from his father, Sheikh Abd al-Ahad, and memorized the Quran. He was trained in all Sufi orders by the age of 17 and was given permission to initiate and train followers in the Naqshbandi order. Sheikh Ahmed made revolutionary changes to the Mughal Empire. He persuaded Jahangir to disallow drinking alcohol and destruction of pubs and clubs. He made the emperor revert the rule of exemption of sacrificing cows. Instead, religious conferences and meetings for spiritual development known as halqas were held throughout the territory. Aside from this, Sheikh Ahmad wrote several letters to his Murideen pupils and Khilafah in Turkish and Arabic. These letters are a marvelous collection of spiritual knowledge and religious information. Later these were collected and preserved in book form by Dr. Ghulam Mustafa Khan and translated to Urdu by Sid Zohar Hussain Shah. This book is known as Maktubat, and as Ghulam Mustafa says, is the best and most knowledgeable book after Quran and Hadith, and are applicable for all problems to rise within 1,000 years. For this purpose, Sheikh Ahmed is known as Mujaddid Alif Sani. Sheikh Ahmed's 3 sons died in a plague, all religious and spiritually well developed. These included Mohammed Sadiq, Mohammed Faraq, and Mohammed Isa, his favorite son being Mohammed Sadiq, the eldest. His death caused Sheikh Ahmad immense sorrow, but he says that bearing this pain of loss gave him so many divine rewards that he'd have been not given them for any other deed. Practices. Criteria of a sheikh. The following would always apply to genuine Sufi Naqshbandi teachers or sheikhs. They comply with the law. They must adhere to the sunnah. They must be scholars. There can be no Sufism without knowledge. They must not engage in bitter religious innovation. They accept interaction with other disciples of the order. They do not accept personal certification of dead persons, or in dreams or through special spiritual experience rohani. There are exceptions to this rule according to the Uwaisi concept of transmission, where someone who lived before can train and transmit knowledge to someone who came later. They only accept written personal certification in the presence of witnesses. 11 principal teachings. Known as the 11 Naqshbandi principles, the first 8 were formulated by Abdul Khalid Gajadwani, and the last 3 were added by Baha-ud-Din Naqshband Bukhari. Remembrance Yad Card Persian, YDKHRD, always orally and mentally repeating the D-Hikr. Restraint Baz Gasht Persian BZGSHT, engaging in the heart repetition of the al-Kalimat at Tayyibah phrase La ilaha il Allah Muhammad Rasul Allah. Watchfulness Nega Persian, Nghdsht, being conscientious over wandering thoughts while repeating al-kalimat at-tayyiba. Recollection Persian Ydddsht, concentration upon the divine presence in a condition of dehawk, foretaste, intuitive anticipation or perceptiveness, not using external aids. Awareness while breathing Haushtar Dam Persian HWSH Dr. DM, controlling one's breathing by not exhaling or inhaling in the forgetfulness of the divine. Journeying in one's homeland Safar Dar Watan Persian Safar Dr. WTN, an internal journey that moves the person from having blameworthy to praiseworthy properties. This is also referred to as the vision or revelation of the hidden side of the Shahada. Watching one's step Nazar Bar Kadam Persian and ZR QDM, do not be distracted from purpose of the ultimate journey. Solitude in a crowd Khalwat Dar and Human Persian KHLWT Doctor and Jamin, although journey is outwardly in this world, it is inwardly with God. Temporal pause Wukuf Izamani Persian WQWFCMNY, keeping account of how one spends his or her time. If time is spent rightfully, give thanks, and time is spent incorrectly, ask for forgiveness. Numerical pause Wukuf Ayadadi Persian WQWFDDY, checking that the dihikr has been repeated in odd numbers. Heart pause Wukuf Ikalbi Persian WQWFQLBY, forming a mental picture of one's heart with the name of God engraved to emphasize that the heart has no consciousness or goal other than God. Types of concentration. Muraqaba. Muraqaba is known as spiritual communion. In this practice, one tries to unveil the mystery of life by losing oneself in it. One imagines his heartbeats calling out the name of the Almighty. It is highly believed that it is true that our heart calls out for Allah with every beat. But it is our hearts which are draped by sins, and so the heartbeat is heard as dihak and not Allah Allah. Muraqaba is done by sitting in a lonely place, with eyes closed and maintaining a calm position, imagining your exterior eyes closed, interior eyes opened, your heart calling out for Allah, and trying to hear the word Allah in each and every heartbeat. Tawajjuh. Tawajjuh is the basis of spirituality. It's the process of transferring spiritual light phase that sheikh transfers from his enlightened heart. This light leads the way to enlightenment and makes truth differentiate from false. No spirituality is possible without Tawajjuh. This is how Islamic spirituality differs from other spiritual practices. In Islamic spirituality, murid tends to be more and more in the company of his sheikh to receive phase through Tawajjuh that makes enlightenment an easier process as his heart day by day enlightens up to God's presence and his commands towards him and humanity. Process of Tawajjuh is like lighting a candle by another candle. The candle that lightened the other loses nothing, and the candle that got lighted gains everything.